Welcome back to Software Without Borders. Today we're joined by Joe Forgét, founder of Igniting Momentum, and my cohort, Tomas Hilliard, Director of Strategy for Accelerance. And as usual, I'm Andy Hilliard, CEO of Accelerance. And right now I'm communicating out of Sonoma, California.
Thanks, Andy. Joe helps leadership teams navigate inflection points, mergers and acquisitions, post-fundraise scale, and major reorgs by blending a practical operating system with a human-centered approach. He's System and Soul certified, has held multiple CXO roles, and has led integrations across distributed teams, including teams displaced from Ukraine, all with a focus on clarity, cadence, and accountability. Today, he'll share how to make 1 + 1 = 3 when teams merge, and how to keep global engineering moving fast without losing the culture. Today's focus, turning chaotic integrations into clear operating rhythms that travel across time zones and cultures.
Hey, welcome, Joe. Welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you guys for having me today.
So the way I like to kick things off is to give everyone context. Why the heck should they stay on with this podcast? What is it about Joe that is interesting, no less compelling? And of course, you have to start at the beginning. Like how did you get to where you are? And before I get into, because I just did notice that one of my questions about System and Soul, obviously we're going to force you to go into that at the appropriate time. But before we do all of that, you've sat in CXO seats. You now coach leadership teams through M&A and scale and transition. So what brought you to this point? What career moments, personally or professionally, shaped your approach to the business that you front?
Well, that's a great question. I will share, because I don't want to bore everybody with 30 plus years to get here, but I'm a lifelong learner, growth mindset type of person, and over the last 5 years, 7 years or so, I had kind of just reflect back on some of the transitions in my career early on. If I split my career into thirds, if you will, the first third, I worked for a large consumer electronics company. We went through a few different mergers, acquisitions. I was fortunate enough to be a part of several of those, and some that went very, very well and others that didn't go as well, and to learn from some of those interactions. And the middle third of my career was I was an entrepreneur. I owned a creative company. We did consumer packaging, and I had two partners, and we went through our ups and downs, especially with the economy in 2008, 2009, 2010, kind of lost our way of what made us unique at times, and so I kind of lived by the adage of if I knew then what I know now, things would have been a little bit different. And in the last probably 7, 8 years ago was where I really got into the life work of what I'm doing now. But it was initially on the other side, right? I was working in two different organizations where I was a senior leader, and we had coaches that were working with us, facilitating strategic planning sessions, bringing operating cadence and team health and culture and assessments into things. And it was through that I really found, hey, I just kept diving deeper and deeper and deeper. And that became, really my passion internally. And then, probably 5 years ago, I told the CEO I was working with that, hey, at some point, I'm going to leave and build a coaching practice, because this is truly what I'm born to do. It's what I want to do. And so that's kind of how I got to where I am today. And I was from being on the side of others, right? Sitting in large publicly traded companies, mid-size organizations, and as an entrepreneur myself, and just really, this is, it's my passion.
So what elements of your professional life, other playbooks or systems and training, you may want to touch upon System and Soul. So what has all gone into the sort of the Joe Forgét proprietary system?
I created Igniting Momentum, the organization, and the ignition framework, which is built around align, activate, and accelerate, right? And kind of 3 phases. But throughout the past 10 years or so, I had operated EOS, Pinnacle and System and Soul, three different frameworks that are very similar. System and Soul is a more modernized evolution of EOS, and it was really when I was introduced to System and Soul and that Soul component that really connected with me. And that was kind of my leaping off point into going and getting certified and bringing that into my coaching practice. I also have tools like Positive Intelligence, the PQ Mental Fitness Program. I went through it as a user. I went and got certified in it, and that really helps us understand our judge and saboteurs and some of the negative self-talk internal that actually holds us back in growing as leaders, and Working Genius and other different frameworks that I brought into what I do. But, the way I do it and how I bring it to market is really, that ignition mindset that first we have to get you started and then kind of build that operating cadence and get that flywheel rolling. Because once it's going, it's a really tough thing to stop.
Before I turn it over to Tomas, I did want to. Not everyone knows what EOS is. I assume I make the mistake too because I've been using it for 10 years and it rolls off my tongue. But describe a little bit of a background in that, and also describe your ICP, which of course also everyone doesn't know because it rolls off my tongue too. Your ideal client profile.
Okay. So EOS stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's one framework methodology. There's four very common ones. There's Scaling Up, which was built off of the Rockefeller habits. There's EOS, or Entrepreneurial Operating System, that Gino Wickman created around tools and concepts of other business leaders. There's a book called Traction that really describes EOS and the operating system and ties it into how it works and that sort of thing. Pinnacle was an evolution of the entrepreneurial operating system, created out of coaches or implementers at EOS, left and created Pinnacle. And, that's based on getting, to that pinnacle, the top of your mountain. It's kind of, the flow of Pinnacle. And System and Soul, again, another operating system framework that was created by former EOS implementers. Benj Miller, Chris White, and are the co-creators with Mackenzie Decker. And just, it's a great framework, but really it's the soul component because people have to operate process, right?
Yeah.
And so, EOS is a tremendous process. I love EOS. This isn't about EOS versus Pinnacle versus, I'll say this. If you don't have a business framework, you don't have an operating system, I suggest you find one because it's a great way to get a business moving in the right direction and to create some common language and core infrastructure, right? And so They're all great for what they are, and
absolutely that resonates.
I've done them all, so
yeah, we have EOS well ingrained within our company, and so we know exactly the language that you're speaking. So taking a step back, I was really curious your transition and interest in coaching. And you mentioned you really began to love coaching and have an interest in it when you were experiencing it yourself. Can you tell me a little bit about what organizations who might need coaching look like before someone like yourself would come in? And then on the flip side, I'm curious to know, what do momentum signals look like? How do you know that these teams are picking up what you're putting down from an align and an execution standpoint?
Okay. Let me start with the first part of that. I believe was, what organizations could benefit from coaching, from what I do, and I think when organizations are in the startup phase, you're really moving fast. You're trying to figure things out. What's my product? What's my pricing model? How do I bring it to market? You're moving fast. And so to have a framework in place that I'll actually say would slow you down from that, waiting for a weekly team meeting to have a conversation around things that you literally need to make a decision on today might be too much structure, right? And but as you're growing and you start to put people into, if I'm the founder and I create a company and I'm the chief everything officer, right? Eventually I start to find people for different positions in the organization. Well, now, how do you stay aligned with everybody and kind of trickle those things down? So as you're moving from kind of the startup, moving fast, everyone's in it together. We roll up our sleeves to, now we're starting to create some structure and definition around who sits in which seats and start to take some of that founder responsibility and bring it down into other leaders. That's where the frameworks can really start to help create that momentum, because it creates, as I mentioned earlier, a common language, but also a structure and a cadence that you can operate in. And so, really, as you enter into stage 2 and you're starting to scale and you're trying to create systems and process and structure, that's where these really, really provide the most value. I don't think you're ever too big for system structure and framework, right? But the larger the organization gets, they have their own internal culture and systems, and maybe a system like System and Soul or the Ignition framework isn't. But really, typically, I'd say as you're approaching that 5 to 50 million range is kind of that sweet spot, and ultimately it's honestly, and I talk to people every day. They got from 0 to 10 million, and start to take retracement back to 9 or 8 million, and it's that whole S curve model, right? They're at that point that what got us here isn't going to get us there, and so taking that step back and working with a coach and creating that clarity in a session room can help your team co-create a strategy and identify those issues and challenges, and what do we need to do differently in order to get to that next stage. And so that's where it really, if you have a 3, 4 person, 7 person leadership team, that's where it's, how do we keep the team on the same page? And ultimately there's the adage, people don't like to change, right? Or, but it's not that people don't like to change. They don't like being told to change. And so when you bring them in and you create the vision and the plan together, everyone's more likely to go execute it. And so that's really where it's, when you're feeling like, hey, the business, instead of me owning the business owns me, it's time for coaching and a framework. So.
Absolutely. And I'm assuming that, your coaching doesn't change an organization overnight. So with that, what are the early success signals that you look for to let you know that the organization is utilizing what you're providing and that it's working?
The inside of the first, and it's a great astute point, right? And I'll tell people there's no magic bullet. So if you're feeling that pressure and that stress today, when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When's the next best? Today, right? And so it's like, hey, it's not going to happen overnight, but deferring it or delaying it because I'm too busy doesn't help either, right? So if we get things moving and we start to get things rolling, I like to meet the clients where they are, right? And so I'm talking to the leadership team about what are the challenges, what are the issues that you're facing, because every company is different and everybody's dealing with different challenges. And so based on where they are in that journey, that's how I would actually structure the first 90-day implementation. If they're a more mature team that's worked together and they have an operating cadence, but maybe their meetings aren't as productive as they could be in other things, we're not going to focus on the meeting structure and cadence as much as maybe the lack of alignment on the destination or the priorities, right? If they don't have any systems and structure and we get the destination and the priorities, but they don't have an operating cadence to execute them, then they're not going to be very successful there either. And so every organization is different in where they are on that level of maturity. So in the first 90 days, I like to focus on getting everyone on the same page. And that's why I say, align, activate, accelerate. If we can get them on the same page, and then we can start, walking before we run. And in that first 90 days, we're going to learn, hey, how good are they at managing rocks or objectives, what you'd call those quarterly initiatives. Not everybody are strong project managers outside of their actual project management. I mean, if you're in software development, you're typically operating in sprints and you're getting things done. That's different than bringing in initiatives outside your day-to-day life, right? And so helping them break them down and achieve things. So I have 30-day, 60-day check-ins in between the quarterlies, so we can learn where do you sit with it, what are you struggling with, and then help them get through those barriers. And so momentum, you typically see, 6 months, 9 months, they're starting to speak the same language, things are rolling along. And I like to get them focused on the gap and the gain mindset. Let's not focus on what didn't get done, but let's focus on everything that did get done that wouldn't have been accomplished if we weren't going down this path, right? Because to say everybody's going to get 100% of their objectives done, especially in the first couple of quarters, it's just not realistic, right? They're trying to keep up with every day. So
yeah, I want to take a quick step back because first off, you just mentioned gap and gain, which then I'm like, okay, where have I heard that? Like, oh yeah, the 10X book that I was reading by.
It's Dr. Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan, I believe.
Thank you very much. I'm like, Gap and Gain is a flashback, really impactful book. But so that is the genesis of my next question. And that is, having, anecdotally speaking, we've been using EOS for over 10 years now, and I swear by it. It just really organizes, prioritizes. It creates accountability. It creates chunks that you can do and you can own. And every small and growing company needs that. And even we're a company under 20 people, and we have a leadership sort of EOS dashboard, and then we have functional EOS, even though they're really small teams, because it's a really good way to organize your issues and your rocks, your quarterly things and your metrics and your to-dos. And but there's a lot of companies out there that add tweaks and flavors and augmentation to that. So I want to find out what the ignition and the system and soul additions, what is your flavor look like, and how does it alter your bread and butter EOS?
Okay. And so System and Soul is, as I mentioned, it was created by former EOS implementers. And so System and Soul has all of the process components of an EOS, but it has more people tools, more of a focus on the why behind the organization. And so from that perspective, it's a little deeper dive into the people aspect. I think, what you mentioned about what does System and Soul do differently versus EOS. I mean, yes, there's different terms for quarterly objectives. In the System and Soul side, coach it a little bit more to OKRs, right? So objectives with key results, and defining things a little bit different with 30, 60, 90-day milestones versus SMART goals in a rock situation of EOS. But again, as long as you're planning for quarterly priorities and you're achieving what you set out to achieve, it doesn't matter if we call it an objective, a rock, or a project, right? So it's, for me, that's just semantics. But on the System and Soul side, there are things around a destination statement. Where are we going, by, when, and why? There's concepts from Jim Collins' Good to Great, the hedgehog concept. What are we deeply passionate about? What can be best in the world at? And what drives our economic engine? And defining that gives us this is our sweet spot. This is our superpower. It helps keep us as business owners and leaders from chasing shiny objects, right? Entrepreneurs, in Michael Gerber's book, The E-Myth, he talks about we love to chase shiny objects like squirrel, right? And so, that's what makes visionaries, right? They have a million ideas, but not all of them fit in our sweet spot as an organization allows us to go execute them and truly create the value add versus it's a distraction. And maybe we can make $100,000 doing it, but at the cost of $2 million in business because we did it, right? And so that's some of those create a little bit more clarity of who we are and the purpose behind the organization. And then in terms of my implementation process, I think that's really where it's just a little bit different from a perspective of if you're to bring in, I'm not taking it to a checklist and saying, okay, hey, we're going to do this here, this here, this here, and this is how we're going to onboard you. I'm really taking the intuitive nature of this is the challenge that the company's facing. These are the things the CEO is saying that he wants to change, or he or she wants to change or fix. These are the issues that are driving the business. And So from that perspective, I take a step back and I focus that first 90 days on getting the team aligned on those elements. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not an out of the box implementation, if you will. And it's because every business is different. And if I don't meet you in the journey where you are today, then I'm just giving you a system, and the system won't solve those immediate challenges. And my goal as a coach, my goal is to help provide maximum value as quickly as possible so the team starts to see some relief. And that's really what it's about. And so, there's a million things we could do, but it's me, the sequence of them and how we focus on them that allows us to, to get performance going faster. And I have an assessment on my website that's kind of an organizational health assessment. It's a simple 25 questions, but it puts things into 4 buckets: purpose behind the business; people, what does our people situation look like; process, what's our operating cadence and our process look like; and performance, how are we performing as a company. And so going into an engagement with an organization, I'd have the leadership team take that assessment. And then from there, based on the scores in those categories, I can layer it together and say, hey, here's where we see some disparities between perhaps the founder CEO believes that they're doing everything great. But meanwhile, we're learning from others in the team that, hey, I don't necessarily agree with that purpose statement. I don't necessarily, and they're literally just not on the same page in terms of they have different perceptions of where they sit in those milestones, right? And so that's kind of how I approach the implementation and the coaching, because again, you're bringing me in to help you. And so from that perspective, I want to make sure that we solve your biggest challenges first, the same as we would go into it and say, hey, what are your quarterly, the most important things we do this quarter to achieve our goal at the end of the year? But sometimes, there's the adage, it's hard to read the label from inside the jar, right? And so you're sitting in that seat. You don't necessarily see everything as clear as maybe you're sharing information. And what I'm hearing is different than how you're perceiving it, right? And then how your team sees it is probably very different than how you see it. And so, it just helps create clarity there, because it all starts with clarity and alignment.
We've been talking a lot, and I think the audience might be thinking that this is it is an operating system for, general flow of a company in a normal set of aspirational and growth circumstances. But you're also dealing with as you said before, every company is different. And you're dealing with a lot of companies that are going radically different kinds of change. It could be mergers and acquisitions, or it could be like, rapid growth or rapid environmental impacts that are caving growth, and layoffs or stuff like that. So you're not only trying to achieve alignment in normal quote unquote, situations, but you're also trying to apply this to some radical change events. So how do you apply that differently and maybe at the same way?
Yeah, I think my approach going into an organization that perhaps is moving from heavily dependent on the founder, some leaders in place trying to build a collective co-created vision, is different than 2 companies that just went through a merger and acquisition, and you're taking 2 teams, 2 different organizations with 2 different sets of strengths and weaknesses, and they're being brought together because of collectively they're supposed to be stronger than apart, right? Hey, this gives us new market opportunity. This brings us in over here, gives us new services. But oftentimes what happens is the default mindset is, we acquired you. You'll just come in and buy into our culture and our systems, right? But this is a premium opportunity to sit down and say, we have a rock star team of people, right? Between these 2 teams, how do we take company A and company B and create company C and reinvent ourselves and take the best of both worlds and eliminate the weaknesses or the negativities? Every business, even the best businesses in the world, there are
Sure.
negative things. There's shadow cultures going on behind the scenes. There's just every company
Get rid of the
has,
baggage.
and
Yeah.
so this is your opportunity to recast that vision. And when you do, not only are you blending the A players of the two teams into a stronger leadership team, but you're also creating an aligned vision that they're completely bought into and are more likely to go achieve. But now you're able to trickle that down into all of the people from the teams and say, okay, hey, we're not forcing you to do it our way. There's a new way that was co-created by the leaders you worked with before and the new leaders over here, and we're going to go conquer the world together. And so it's an opportunity to really take a step back and do that. And then if an organization's looking to scale for exit, and they're looking to solve some of the operational challenges, if you will, kind of lock in the leadership team, be focused more on building enterprise value, and and really creating a less founder dependent infrastructure, then I would handle that differently too, because potentially that timeline is a different timeline than, hey, we're in year 3 and I want to grow it to the moon versus I want to exit in 3 years. And so we have to do things differently and focus on different things. And so I would handle those 3 situations differently. And I actually have ignition tracks that are focused on ignite the vision is that blended co-created vision. Ignite the venture is the blending of teams, and ignite the value is a process around how do we transition you to a less founder dependent model that's also focused on building enterprise value. So a simpler business that's a more predictable revenue stream that ultimately gets a higher multiple in an exit. So, and that, Tomas, you asked earlier of, how do I approach the first 90 days? Typically, it's one of those 3, whether it's a 90-day engagement or an ongoing momentum journey relationship. The first 90 days is typically focused on one of those 3. Those are the most common scenarios.
It's extremely clear to me, and I think it's an easy sell for any team who's going through one of these inflection points to bring in a coach. But Joe, I'd be willing to bet that you would say that a company doesn't have to wait for one of these inflection points to bring you in. What are some other signals that a company can look for internally, apart from an inflection point, that, hey, we could really use Joe or some coaching in general to help create alignment within our organization?
That's a great question. I think common ones are where the leaders are stressed, they're tired, they feel like they do everything, and that doesn't have to just be the founder, right? Or saying, our team just doesn't do what we set out to do, or no one's accountable for things, right? And so in different situations of, I've had situations or heard situations of someone's hired 3, 4, 5 marketing leaders or sales leaders, and they say, they're great in the interviews, but they never work out. Well, chances are that's actually an internal issue, not you hired the wrong person 4 times, right? People say, I'm not a micromanager, but their team feels micromanaged. Those are typically, if I'm a CEO, I talked about the positive intelligence mental fitness program earlier. If my saboteur, my number one saboteur, is controller, what that's saying is I have a need to control everything. I need to know what everybody's doing. So while I could be saying I want to empower them, I'm still asking questions and checking in and putting things in place to know what everybody's doing, because I don't trust them, right? And so when you really take a step back and you say, okay, hey, I want to empower them, I want to trust them, then we can work on dealing with the saboteur at play and getting the recognition that, oh, that's just my saboteur rearing its ugly head. I need to take a step back and say, that's okay. They're going to do it differently than me, or I trust they're going to do it. But if you want to truly trust your people, especially in this remote workplace where we're distributed around the world, if you want to trust that people are doing what you think they're doing, co-create vision, strategy, and get that leadership team and the teams on the same page, because most people really want to do their job and be good at their job. And so one of the things that, in System Soul framework talk about giving the person the keys to their car, right? Their car, clarity around the role, what it's responsible for, autonomy, can they make autonomous decisions around in their role, and which decisions do they need to bring to their leadership with solutions or asking for help, right? And then what are the results that they're responsible for in that seat, because every seat's different. And so if you give people good definition around their role, and I don't mean a job description with 10 bullet points plus the last one is other duties as assigned. I'm talking about true overarching, this is the primary responsibility of the role. And when you define those types of things, then people go execute. And so I think a lot of the challenges people face in growing is, you don't know what you don't know. And you often feel some of these pains and say, oh, it's just normal, right? Mm. And maybe it is normal, but it doesn't mean you have to have them, right? Yeah. And so, Tiger Woods, a great example of at the top of his game, number one player in the world. He fired his coach and hired a new coach so he could hit the ball further, so he could get better, right? And that mindset of wanting to be great, good isn't good enough. I want to be great. That mindset drives him. And you see it a lot in athletes. And I know you would know that, Tomas. Like that's an athlete mindset, right? Like I need to get better. I'll do anything to get better. But business owners and business leaders need coaches. Coaches need coaches. I have coaches that I communicate with and work with in masterminds and other things. I mean, it's not a sign of weakness to ask for help. It's actually being vulnerable. It's the first basis of trust. If I can say I need help or I could use some assistance and I'm able to be vulnerable, that's the first step in building trust and ultimately growing as a team. So, yeah, I mean, you definitely don't have to wait for one of those inflection points to get better.
Well, I may go down that rabbit hole after this next question, because now you've just triggered the coaches need coaches and stuff like that. And my thinking was you could be overcoached too. At some point, I had too many coaches, and it was like paralysis by analysis. But anyway, again, maybe two questions down the road or not, but I want to actually go down into your sort of cross-cultural, cross-border experiences, because obviously we're a company, Accelerants, that matches certified, verified, trustworthy global teams with primarily U.S. but also Western Europe and Australian clients. And there's a lot of need for alignment and synergy and integration. And I want to hear about your experiences, like your Ukraine experiences. Can you describe that scenario, and can you describe your approaches to gaining alignment?
You're referencing a time where I was on the client side, right? This was in a C-level role. I was the president and CEO of the company, and we had we had people all over the world, period. But on the development side, we had a team of developers that were in Kyiv, Ukraine, at the time when the whole situation with Russia invading initially and everything else. And it was a very scary time. And, when you talk about the need for results as an organization, but then the human element, that's one small component, right? Just being accepting of there's a lot going on. And it was a very tragic time. But what I learned specifically there was, you think they know what you're after, right? But if it's not simplified and documented in easy ways for everybody to stay on the same page, when everybody, and in this situation, literally flees, right? Because many of them left Ukraine. And so now we were distributed, speaking from US, UK, and people in Ukraine. Now the people in Ukraine are all over. And so now you're not sitting in a room together talking about projects and features. And so learning to work together more collaboratively on tools like Zoom and Teams and Google Meets is one thing.
Yeah.
But you also have multiple languages going on here. You've got, and so the need to break down the vision and purpose of where we're going, and simplify things in a way that everybody understands what we're marching towards, and is on the same page. Because what I was seeing was some people were taking a higher level of ownership over things, that which is great to see, but ultimately wasn't their role to make those decisions, right? And so it's like, how do we get everybody on the same page? What does the operating structure look like with tremendous clarity? What are we marching towards? What are our priority initiatives? And then mostly, when you talk about organizational health, you have to build a cohesive leadership team, and then you have to communicate that message with clarity, and then you have to over communicate that message with clarity, and we all think that, hey, I've said it 3 or 4 or 5 times, right? But what's the adage? They need to hear it 20 times, or before it sticks. And so as leaders, I think we feel like we're sharing, but we're not sharing enough, right? And so how do we create clarity and simplify things at least level? And that's what we did. But I learned a ton about how much heart and grit and love the people had for the application that they were working on, and the organization. And just a lot of the challenges were really more around communication, understanding the vision of the application, the organization, where they fit into things. And so, some people like to operate loosely, and I think in a remote distributed environment, more structure, more clarity. And I don't mean structure like bureaucracy and infrastructure, but understanding, who do I go to when I have questions? Who's the decision maker? What am I able to make decisions on my own? Having clear product roadmaps and alignment there too. Because the other thing, I'm sure you guys have faced this, people love to work on their own sub projects because they think they've got, this feature they could add, or I could do this way. And they don't like to stick to what we're all marching towards, because they have my idea is better, right? And so that's false alignment. That's, you can't have people just agree with you, yeah, and then they go do what they want anyway. Like we've got to hash it out. We've got to defend our ideas and get to true alignment. And we'll all say, hey, we could go left, we could go right, we could go straight. We just agreed to go straight. We're going to go straight. And then the people that still want to go left and right, unfortunately, you can performance manage them, coach them up. If they don't live by, the greater good of the organization, sometimes you have to make tough people decisions too.
Wow, what you say, I mean, makes so much sense, and it's a lot of it is in the agile manifesto approach to software development, but at the same time, it's also antithetical, I think, to U.S. culture, which is somewhat very transactional and somewhat litigious. If you don't like what you're getting, you're going to sue and just GSD, throw it over the wall, GSD, and delegate and turn a blind eye to what's happening, and you expect results and stuff like that. And then you add in the international component. And then you add in the male component. Men are just, men and American men. And oh my God, there's so many things working against the absolute pure, approach to what you say, needs to take place in order to be effective. And, we deal with that every single day. We have services like alignment services, which tends to be, relatively short classroom experiences. But honestly, what you're saying is something that, I could see, honestly, companies should reinvest some of the benefits that they get from global software development in terms of specialized talent and cost efficiency, and reinvest that in fractional ongoing alignment, because there's so much to be gained. You just can't learn it overnight or over a week or over a couple of weeks. Again, you have all these things, the cultural things and male things and international things that are basically dissolving the learning that takes place over a short period of time. You need constant, team clarity, team alignment, a cadence for this, right?
Absolutely. You mentioned the Agile Manifesto, and the concept of a daily stand-up, right? It's a great concept if every morning for 15 minutes we're just ratcheting through. Where are we? What do you need? Any barriers I can break down for you? Whatever. But when those meetings turn into hour-long conversations that aren't around those initiatives, right? Those answering those questions, then is the meaty working for you or working against you? And so when you talk about cadence and agendas, I mean, we've all been to meetings that have terrible agendas or no agenda at all, and no outcome comes out of it. And so, the concept of a good meeting would be to make decisions and move on, right? So the more prepared you come into those conversations with, hey, I hit a roadblock, but I have 3 different ways I could handle this. I think we should go this way. And you're asking for help from the group to say, okay, hey, if we coded this way, it would do this. If we coded this way, it would do this. If we did this way, okay, I think you're right. We should do that. Or, I see where you're going with that. Have you thought about this or this, right? And that's going to create better ideas. And so people coming and just saying, I've hit a roadblock, I need help, that's not productive, right?
Yeah.
What are the possible solutions of how we could get there, and where are you thinking that you would take it? And so the making those conversations meaningful is important. And on the other side, when you're living in a remote distributed workforce, I think we undervalued what it was like when we were all premise based and you had, water cooler talk, right? People would talk in the lunchroom, they would talk in the hallway, and sure, from a 8-hour day, maybe 2 hours of the day was sidebar conversations, but that was relationship building, that was team building, that was culture building, right? And in many instances, ideation, right? Like people are sitting there talking and it's like, hey, we just came up with this cool idea because we were just having a soda on the side of the, in the hallway. And so I'm working at my house, you're working at your house, you're in a different country. Part of the relationship building and the team cultural component, you kind of have to allow for some of the meetings to have that extra space. And as leaders, you actually have to be very intentional to make people interact, because relationships are built. We used to have the saying at an organization I worked in, alignment happens through conversation. And so as a leader, important conversations had to take place face to face. If it couldn't be face to face, it was on a video call. If it couldn't be on a video call, it was on a phone call. But you were not going to send an email or a text message to handle an important conversation. And I think people are so comfortable with Slack and chat, WhatsApp and other things, that we hide behind a keyboard and we just send a message. It's very easy for us to and how that person is feeling in the moment is the difference of how they receive the message you sent them, right? Like they could be having a bad morning and they read your message and you didn't mean anything by it. And literally they take it as like, how dare they, right? And so it's the importance of, what is your communication cadence? What is your meeting cadence? What is your expectations? As a business owner, you're allowed to have expectations of how prepared people come to meetings. As a leader, allowing people to show up unprepared, you're the one that's failing. And the concept of extreme ownership, you can't blame them for being unprepared. Everything rises uphill, right? So if you're allowing it to happen, change it, right? Get your team prepared. Teach them what being prepared looks like, and then model it, right? You also can't hold others accountable if you don't do what you said you would do. So how do you model accountability for them? How do you model the behaviors you want them to do? And so, we define a lot of the culture beyond core values, but into the organizational habits and the true culture that you want as a part of my coaching as well, because those habits that you want people to model, we've all had the employee or the coworker that we wanted to clone. If I could have 5 Tomas, we'd be great, right? But you don't, right? You have one. What are the common things between Andy and Tomas and others that are those unique components? And we find those commonalities, and those are the behaviors, those are the habits. And so it's culture is intentional. It is what you allow, and it's not, a plaque on a wall. It's what you do. So
Look, I love EOS and it gives structure, but at the same time, now that we've just been talking, and I'm thinking, getting back to my thesis of having someone like you, and this isn't, I'm not trying to sell sell without selling or something like that. But having a person that has continuity in culture creation and fluidity in getting people alignment, you can have a structural framework like EOS or something like that, which is good, and it creates some of this interaction and sharing, and but it doesn't necessarily do all it could do, I think, in terms of creating the co-located water cooler environment and ideation and creativity. I think it's certainly needed. You need structure because if you don't have structure and you don't have flow, you don't have anything. But I'm thinking it's kind of missing the flow part. Maybe that's the heart and soul part.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you think about processes or systems, right, you have to have systems and processes to operate.
Yeah.
But who's operating them? How are you leading them, right? I have a client, one of their, it's a great saying, it's lead people, manage things. And I just, in the end, as leaders, it's our job to educate and communicate and lift up and break down barriers for people and to help them get better. And there's the adage, you can lead a horse to water, can't make it drink. I mean, at the end of the day, you can coach people and know they have the inner capability to do it, and they never take the initiative to do it. Well, that they're never going. If they haven't by now, they're probably not going to, right? So like sometimes they have the ability to be better, but they're not taking the initiative to do it, and you're coaching them, and you're truly coaching them. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to part ways with people like that too. But in the end, it's our job as leaders to clear the path, to break down barriers, to guide them where they need to go, to build the roadmaps of where we're going as an organization. And you mentioned EOS, and I hope it never comes across this way. I love EOS. I love Pinnacle. I love System and Soul. I mentioned earlier, if you don't have a framework or an operating system, you need one, right? You also mentioned, not pitching me, I'll share with you. Look, coaches, like therapists, could be qualified in something, but how comfortable are you with that person? Are you able to be vulnerable? And to coin a Patrick Lencioni term, are you willing to get naked, right? And truly be vulnerable and allow yourself to not know everything with that coach. And so not all coaches are created equal, and not all coaches, are you gonna connect with, right? I'm not everybody's cup of tea, right? And so I'll share, I usually approach things this way. I have a community of coaches. If somebody's looking for a coach, if I'm not the right fit, I probably know someone that is. And it's a part of someone's DNA to truly be a coach. And I mentioned assessments earlier. There's the Clifton Strength Finder assessment. There's a few different ways to interpret the top 5 strengths. There's a group out of Texas called Core Clarity that's an interpretation. There's a few different interpretations of it, but it's on the premise we all have the same 34 inner strengths or talents, but it's the sequence of them that makes us unique, right? And what our top 5 talents or strengths are kind of defines what we're great at. There's 2 different philosophies in life: get better at things you're not good at, or double down on your strengths, right? And so when you as a leader put someone in their strength zone, you're going to watch them thrive and be successful. And for me, I got introduced to that concept 10 years ago, 11 years ago. I took the assessment. My number 1 strength or talent is developer. And that's, how I learned it through Core Clarity was developer. I love developing people, but sometimes I know they can do it, and I'm not willing to give up on them, right? But meanwhile, they're not taking the initiative to do it. So when I say that, I know that firsthand. But I truly, I believe good coaches are empathetic, but also in a way like they just connect with you, right? Where you can feel comfortable sharing. And if you don't feel comfortable sharing, you're not going to give me the truth. And if you're not giving the truth to your team, right, then how can you expect us to get alignment and move things forward? And so whether it's EOS, Pinnacle, System and Soul, they're all great. for me, it's a relationship, and if I'm not the one to maximize your team's performance, I'm sure that there are people out there that can, and that's been my approach to it.
Well, I'll say it for you. Anyone out there that's listening, if you don't have a personal coach, you're not reaching you're not improving as quickly and as well as you could be. If your company doesn't have coaches, your company is not improving as well as it could be. And I'm a complete believer in that. I'm a big Pat Lencioni fan as well. And also, I hearken back to your Tiger Woods thing. Why why does he need a new coach when he's number one in the world? Because he needs to keep improving. Status quo is never good enough, and in this world, that's just the way it is. And so, look, thank you very much, Joe. I really appreciate this conversation. There's a lot of areas that we couldn't go into because we don't have 10 hours, but I found the conversation fascinating. And is there anything you want to leave with the audience in addition to how to get a hold of you?
I'm Joe Forgét, leadership team coach with Igniting Momentum. My website is ignitingmomentum.com. I mentioned there's an organizational health assessment on the site. It measures how scalable and saleable you are. Doesn't mean you have to sell, but in the adage of Whitney M. Young saying, better to be prepared for an opportunity and not have one than to have an opportunity and not be prepared. So you should always be building a business that can scale. And if the right opportunity came, would be saleable, right? And so that's my mindset. So, and I'm also on LinkedIn, just Joe Forgét or Igniting Momentum.
All right, Tomas, you have some words?
Thank you, Joe. No, this was awesome. And I feel like I need to go find a few more coaches in my life as well. So you've certainly convinced one member of your audience.
Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate you having me on today. And to everybody listening, thank you for your time. And hope I provided some nugget of impact. So thank you.
Absolutely. And if you're not subscribed already, subscribe to the podcast and leave a 5-star rating if you think we deserve it. And we look forward to having you on the next Software Without Borders podcast. Thank you very much.